Hello and welcome back. We are celebrating Attacking Third's 2-year anniversary. Happy birthday to us. And we're going to keep talking about NWSL players in the upcoming World Cup because it is just 8 days away. You heard that right. Nearly a week to go before the FIFA 2023 World Cup, kicking off on July 20th. Yes, there's going to be a ton of NWSL representation out in the tournament with 60 players, multiple international teams with NWSL squads represented among them. But there's also some debutantes within the debutantes going to the World Cup. Look, with this being one of the most historic World Cups in many different capacities, we've got the first ever Women's World Cup tournament that is going to be hosted across 2 countries. The first time there's going to be 32 national teams represented. There's going to be a historic number of debutante teams making their first appearance as well. So that means there's going to be a ton of players with the opportunity to represent a World Cup for the first time. And within that, there's even some of those NWSL players as well. We know that Ireland is going to be a debutante team. In fact, they are kicking off the World Cup against Australia on July 20th. But Panama is also one of these debutante teams as well, heading into the World Cup. A couple of CONCACAF teams for the first time alongside Haiti as well. And we wanted to take an opportunity in a moment here to maybe touch on some players that we want to take a look at or keep a closer eye on. I'm very, very excited to maybe see some interesting things out of Panama, because I wasn't too sure if this particular player was going to be on the roster, because there's always those provisional rosters that come through with large number of players and who's it going to get whittled down to. But Riley Tanner is going to represent NWSL with Panama as well, going down under. And that was a little bit of a surprise for me, Lisa, but I just wasn't too sure. Even with her success, she kind of came on a little late with Panama. So I was like, is there enough time here for her to build up with this team? But I think that's that's a common thread with a lot of maybe surprise NWSL names going to the World Cup, that they had a short window, but here they are, they've arrived.
Yeah, I think Riley Tanner is definitely an interesting one. She currently plays with the Washington Spirit in the NWSL. She's a forward. She's been scoring some goals. She's been a big part of that team. She's from Michigan. She graduated from Alabama and was chosen in the 3rd round of this year's draft. So she's a rookie in the NWSL, and you're exactly right. It was she had a good run with Panama leading up to this World Cup. Her first appearance was only in 2023. She's only got 2 appearances. However, she's got a goal. So 2 caps, 1 goal for Riley Tanner. And she played in the Interconfederation playoffs with Panama. So she was part of the 23-player squad that actually helped Panama as debutantes get to their very first World Cup against Papua New Guinea. Riley Tanner is one that scored a goal against them, right? She came in off the bench and she ended up getting that insurance goal for them, getting a 2-0 win for Panama over Papua New Guinea. And that's what pushed Panama into the World Cup. So yeah, I think it is a little bit interesting. I like that you called her a bit of a surprise one for this Panama roster, because she's only got 2 caps, right, heading into it. And but you also think about the time that she got those caps, right? During the Interconfederation playoffs, she was part of the squad that helped push them. So she's already been part of the very recent success of this Panama side. And now she gets to go to the World Cup and go down under. So she is definitely one to keep an eye out at age 23. She's from Michigan as well, and plays with the Spirit as a forward. Keep an eye on Tanner with Panama.
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe some other surprise names. I think if at this point, some folks might be like, I called that. I knew that this player was going to be really, really good and head down under. But Savannah DeMello for United States Women's National Team, kind of a surprise in some sense, in that she hadn't had her first cap with the team until literally the send-off match, where she came in to the game as a substitute. We mentioned on the preview for that game, you specifically said I think this is the game you want to make sure she gets that out of the way before she goes to the World Cup. But while it might be a surprise, and in that sense, in terms of what we have seen out of her in NWSL, maybe it's one of these things where you could look at this player and say, hey, this actually all goes in line with what we've heard out of the coaching staff in the buildup to the World Cup, where club play was going to be a little bit of a final indicator for who's going to go. And so maybe in that sense, it's not a surprise.
Yeah, I think Savannah DeMello is one that when the U.S. roster dropped was a bit of a shock, not necessarily because she doesn't deserve it. She's completely played her way onto this roster for the United States and Blatko Ananovsky with what she's done at Racing Louisville. However, it was a surprise because she didn't have a cap, as you mentioned. She did get her first one in the send-off series for the U.S. against Wales, but I think a bit of a surprise to see her on that roster and moving forward and kind of what can happen there. In terms of another debutante team, because when you look across the world stage and who's going, there are a number of debutantes, whether it's Vietnam, Zambia, Haiti, Morocco, Panama, the Philippines, Portugal, and Ireland. We touched on Panama a little with Riley Tanner, but with the Republic of Ireland, this is a debutante, and there are 3 NWSL players going to the World Cup with the Republic of Ireland. I think the biggest name out there is midfielder Denise O'Sullivan. She has been in the NWSL for years. She started in Houston in 2016, but mostly she's been with North Carolina Courage since 2017. She's helped them lift multiple championships, a Challenge Cup championship, and she's been part of the international stage for Ireland since 2011. 102 caps, 18 goals heading into this World Cup. It's no wonder, this is not a surprise at all that she is on the roster. 29 years old. And massive for Denise O'Sullivan. She's talked about it in interviews that you can see, whether it's with North Carolina Courage or with Ireland, about how proud she is of her team. She's from County of Cork in Ireland, and it's her first World Cup, and she gets to go with her Irish side. But there's also a couple others. Sinead Farley with Gotham FC, who's back in the NWSL. She was a catalyst and a big advocate, speaking out for the players' rights in the CBA after a lot of abuse and mistreatment happened in the NWSL. And she got recently called up into the Irish national team. And now she is on that roster. We saw her play with Ireland against the United States during those April friendlies. And she got called up again. She's been a big part of Gotham's side in the midfield. And then also Marissa Shiva. She's with Washington Spirit in the NWSL. She signed with them last year, I believe, as like a national team replacement player initially, and then ultimately got a contract in the offseason and at the start of this year. And she's been a part of Mark Parsons' squad throughout Washington Spirit's tenure. She only has 4 caps with Irish national team. She had to get her passport and had to become an Irish citizen. Her family has a lot of ties there, both of her parents, her American father and then her Irish mother. So she's now Irish American. She got the paperwork and she was able to join the Republic of Ireland national team. And she'll be headed down under to the World Cup. She was a big part of those April friendlies as well. She played most recently for Ireland against France in their send-off game and heads to the World Cup with 4 caps. So a number of players on debutante teams in the NWSL.
Lisa, I don't know if you know this at this point, but there's 8 days till the World Cup. I feel like I've been repeating that on this episode. But look, we love a theme here at Attacking Third. And while really the theme is happy birthday to us, there's 8 debutante teams heading to this World Cup, and we're honestly really thrilled to take a look at every single one. We've been chatting a lot about Ireland. We've chatted a bit about Panama as well, but Haiti is going to be a team that is represented at this World Cup as a debutante. Morocco entering this tournament for the first time. We are also going to get a look at the Philippines for the first time in this upcoming World Cup. Portugal alongside in that group E with the United States is a debutante team. We've also got Vietnam as part of that group as debutantes. We've got Zambia that is going to be represented at this World Cup for the first time. And of course, we mentioned Ireland and Panama as well. So 8 teams getting their first chance to represent their nations at this upcoming World Cup. I think you can go through each of these 8 teams and find something to be excited about for all of them. It's not just the fact that they are going to be there for the first time, although that's an incredible honor and an incredible moment to be the firsts in your program's history. That in itself is probably the biggest storyline around so many of these teams. But I mean, there have been some moments where we have come onto this show in this recent window of time leading up to this World Cup, and we've had to talk about some really good performances from these teams heading into the group stage, whether it was Vietnam and how they had performed against Germany, or Zambia and how they also have performed against Germany as well, like not being intimidated by these big moments in front of them.
No, I mean, I think you have to look at it as a whole, right? In some of these senses and some of these debutante teams as well. I know you mentioned Haiti, starting with them because they're a CONCACAF team, near and dear to our heart. They are a nation that, as an entire country, men's or women's side, they haven't appeared at a World Cup in 49 years. The men's team went in 1974 to the Men's World Cup, and then it's been a bit of a drought. 49 years later, you see this women's national team for Haiti beating Chile in the Interconfederation playoff final, going on a run throughout the W Championship, going on a run throughout the Interconfederation playoff, basically dominating in the attacking end, saying, hey, we're going to be a team that scores goals and just runs over teams and gets that goal differential. You also look at Morocco. This is a team that qualified because they were runners up at the CAF Women's African Cup of Nations, a tournament in which they hosted as Morocco. And they're riding the wave of their men's team, as they should and as the nation should. You look back to November of last year for the Men's World Cup. They were the first African side to reach the semifinals of a men's World Cup, and they went on an incredible run. It was so fun to watch the Moroccan men's team play, and now we get to watch the women's side. So the stories that surround these debutante nations go deeper than just, wow, they're headed to their first World Cup. And there's so many different factors as to why there are 8 debutantes. Of course, one of them being the expanded field of 32 players, or 32 teams, but also because there's a little bit more investment in these women's programs. And that's what is interesting to see. I mean, you look at Portugal. This is a nation that on their men's side has done tremendous throughout the World Cup and in international play and through their league play for the men's side, and their women's side just haven't gotten enough resources. And we're starting to see that change a little bit now with Portugal being named as debutantes and headed into this World Cup.
No, I love that within so many of these debutante teams, we kind of have tried to bridge a little bit of what American audiences can see at this World Cup. And it's not just the U.S. women's national team, although, of course, there's going to be a lot of folks with rooting interest there. But even just touching on some of these debutante teams and how there are the crossover with American players, within some of these rosters as well, whether it's for, Panama, as we mentioned, with Riley Taylor, but even with the Philippines, so many of their players have American roots as well, playing within collegiate systems or coming up in youth programs. I want to shout out Meg Reyes. She's got some great content out there right now, building up to the World Cup around the Philippines team. So go check out her recent podcast project. And I just am really, really amped up about these teams. I think even within them, they could cause some of their groups problems. You mentioned Portugal. We just had our episode where we talked about dark horses, and I've got them picked to make some trouble in Group E. They're my dark horse out of Group E for sure. And I'm really eager to kind of see some of all of this kind of come full circle a little bit. We're celebrating the 2 years of attacking third, and just hearing you talk about Morocco and know that we had an interview with Rosella Ayan, just as they were coming off of that historic, kind of AFCON run. And I'm just like reliving that, like as you're talking about it. So just kind of as it gets closer and closer, I'm just kind of like, we're going to finally get to stop talking about all the what ifs and finally get to see everything in action on the pitch. And I'm also eager to take a look at some of the players that are going to be representing in this World Cup who will eventually make a return from this tournament, but come to NWSL specifically. So they're going to these World Cups representing NWSL clubs that we actually haven't had a chance to see them play with. So for a few teams going into this World Cup, if you are an NWSL club with players that are representing there's some players that fans are going to get a look at for the first time just as these announcements for these signings have occurred. I mean, Orlando Pride has a couple of them, Kansas City Current, and so does Houston Dash.
Yeah, I think that's really important to touch on. I know people in our chat are saying like, hey, thanks. I'm just joining you guys. Thanks for giving me players to watch out for. And that's a really cool thing about, for me, I think having the transfer window right kind of overlapping with the start of the World Cup, because we're seeing a lot of different signings happening in the NWSL. But there's like a caveat in the club signing releases that say, but we won't get this player until after they're back from the World Cup. So yes, of course, they'll miss them. We're going on an NWSL 6-week break. There will be Challenge Cup, but then you get them back stronger than ever coming off of a World Cup play. As you mentioned, Orlando does have a couple of them. Mariana La Roquette, she will be representing Argentina at the World Cup. She's played in the NWSL before. She spent time with Kansas City for a majority of their 2021 year at the very start of that season. So it was a rough season for Kansas City, but remember, they went on a run at the end of the year where they were just playing spoiler, and La Roquette had this incredible goal for Kansas City from like 5 yards over the halfway point. Do you remember this, Sandra?
Yes.
She like gets her head up, sees that the goalkeeper is out of position, and just nets this one from like literally the halfway line. It was fantastic. That was Mariana La Roquette, part of that run for KC Current that was just knocking teams out of the playoffs, knocking them lower and lower, and not being able to pick up points because of this run. So she'll be representing Argentina. She's been at the international level since 2014. She's got nearly 30 caps for Argentina. She's going to be a big part of that squad, but we haven't seen her in the NWSL in 2 years. So that's a player to look out for as well. And Orlando also has Rafaela, defender, who will join the NWSL after the World Cup and with Brazil, but she's joining Orlando. It'll be her second time, in the NWSL, right? She started with Houston. That was years ago, right at the start of the league. So impressive to see her. She's been a big part of this Brazilian international team on the roster since 2012. She's got over 75 caps, 8 goals for Brazil. Those are just 2 Orlando sides that are joining. That'll be back. But there's a couple others, right? When we talk about Stine Ballestager, defender for Kansas City that is recently signed. She's a Denmark international. And then Houston, they've got Andressa Alves, another Brazilian midfielder that will be joining after the World Cup.
Bring them out. Bring them out. I love it. I'm here for it. You can see in my bio on Twitter, I said I'm always here to yell about Latinas in soccer. I'm excited. I love the return of Mariana Loquet to the NWSL. I love that there's even more Brazilians that are coming back into this league and in different phases of their career. I love that you touch on Rafael just getting a chance to be back in the United States and getting a chance to see how this player plays now in this present state of her career. I'm here for it. So I know I'm going to keep a close eye on some of these players as they perform in the World Cup, because we're going to get back to watching them eventually at some point when the regular season does crank back up and players do return back from the tournament. So we're celebrating 8 days out of the World Cup, 8 debutante teams, our 2-year anniversary. Happy birthday to us.